Okay. Did you want me to start?
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Before we begin today's session, I just wanted to begin with an overview of the ARC Linkage program for those who may not be as familiar as others about the specifics of the grant scheme. So the ARC Linkage Projects scheme is a scheme that aims to support the initiation and development of long-term strategic partnerships between higher education organisations and industry. The projects are designed in partnership with the industry partner to address an issue identified by the partner. And I just need to move my screen. Here we go. I want to share this with you. So yeah, basically the projects are formed in partnership with the industry partners. And that's a clear difference between some of the other ARC schemes like the Discovery Program. The distinct difference is that the partner organisations, and you can have one or more partner organisations, are expected to provide a cash contribution towards the project. And the combined cash contribution needs to be 25% of what you're asking from the ARC. So that's quite different to the other schemes. The other difference is that 30% of the selection criteria, as you can see there, is based on benefit, and therefore you need to be able to demonstrate how the proposed project both benefits the partner and can provide economic, social and cultural benefits to Australia. In our second and third seminars, we'll dive a lot deeper into the specifics about what's required around the assessment and how to write the application to address that. But I just wanted to give you a high-level overview of that today. In terms of outcomes, the ARC Linkage program enjoys a higher success rate than some of the other programs. You're looking sort of at about a 31% success rate as opposed to around sort of 20% with the Discovery Program. And this year, after having rolling dates for some years, the ARC has now reintroduced funding rounds. So this year we're looking at 3 funding rounds, the first being in April, then the 10th of August and the 10th of December. And I should also add that in terms of the cash contribution, some organisations are exempt from providing the cash contribution, these being charities, museums and some non-profit organisations. But you can look further into the details of the funding guidelines, which you can find on Grant Connect there. So, as I said, the faculty has actually had a very high success rate with ARC Linkage projects over the last couple of years. Since 2018, we've successfully won 3 out of 4 applications that we've submitted, totaling 1.1 million in funding. The federal government last year moved an extra 30 million into the ARC Linkage program, which indicates a move towards funding more applied research with industry-based outcomes. We see this as an opportunity to build on our past success with the ARC Linkage program. And with that in mind, we've developed this ARC Linkage seminar series with past ARC Linkage winners in the faculty. Each of our 1-hour seminars is aimed at providing guidance and tips for each stage of the application journey. After these seminars, the Faculty Research Office will be sending out an EOI form for those interested in applying in 2021 or 2022. Kathy Smith will lead our first seminar today, focused on developing partnerships. Over to you, Kathy.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. That's okay, Kathy. I'll start us off together. And thank you so much, Sharon, and also to all the team in the research office. I mean, one of the reasons why we have been successful in these linkage projects, apart from the brilliant talent of our academics and their partners, is the support that we have through this team. So thank you so much. It really, makes a huge difference to us in being able to understand that different aspects of the applications, as well as facilitating a good application, which is what your team have done exceedingly well with you leading it. So as Sharon mentioned, we've got these 3 seminar series related to the linkages. And later on in the year, we'll look at the DP to keep those 2 schemes a bit separate. And today we're really fortunate to have Kathy, who agreed to be in the hot seat for some questions about the whole kind of idea of partnerships. So thank you also very much, Kathy, for sharing your time and expertise today so generously in talking with us about the partnership development. So Kathy and I have looked at a few different questions that we'll talk about, but we're going to encourage you at the same time to add your questions into the chat as we go. So we'll be talking about things like what's a successful partnership, what are some of the challenges that you encounter and how do you manage them, how do you do kind of expectation management with a partner, etc. But so you might have questions related to those topics as we go, or you might have other questions that lead on from what we're talking about. So please feel free to drop the questions into the chat and we'll either ask you to come on and ask them yourself, or that we'll read them out from there. So we have until just before 2 o'clock today, because at the end of the session, we'll go back and talk a little bit about our partnership development grant. That is a way of encouraging within the faculty people to start building up partnerships, and also some other details around the EOI, the expression of interest, that we're using as a kind of scaffold, as we've done with the discovery projects, to help people to be able to move through a process that's supported in the faculty around putting together a great application. So Kathy, thank you again. And Kath has had a number of successful partnerships with external organisations over the years that have been with small organisations, schools, with bigger organisations, Catholic Ed, for instance, over a long period of time, both national and international now, with a really interesting partnership that she's developing through Irish education. So, Kath, can I ask you to begin with just reflecting on these different kinds of partnerships that you've had over time? How would you think about what a successful partnership looks like?
Oh, thanks, Mandy, and thanks everybody for coming along. It's really nice to just share my experiences with you today. And I know we all have a whole range of different experiences, but partnerships to me, I suppose, are the lifeblood of the work that I do. I love working in partnerships with organisations. My research area is very much about teacher thinking and about teacher professional knowledge of practice. And a lot of that has been situated in the area of teacher professional learning. So I need to work directly with teachers and learn from them. And so the relationships and partnerships that I establish with outside organisations are critical, because I can't undertake my research unless I establish those partnerships. So I think even in saying that, I've already revealed a bit of a value position around my research, because I really believe in learning from teachers and working with teachers. And so that leads me into what I think is one of the things that makes a successful partnership, and that is working with organisations that share a value position around the research that you want to do. It sounds very obvious to say that, I want to work with teachers, but not every organisation positions teachers as active participants in a learning process. Sometimes organisations see professional development as things that need to be done to teachers to get them better at what they're doing. And so I think a successful partnership is when you find an organisation that seems to have a shared vision and understanding about what you value in your research. I think also too that a successful partnership is one that's really mutually advantageous for both the researcher or the team of researchers and the organisation itself. I think that's critical, actually. And I think that that relies on us as researchers really getting to know an organisation really well, working out what that organisation values, how it positions itself and profiles itself in whatever market that they are, you know, working in, the public perception of the work of that organisation, how that's understood, the inherent complexities that that organisation deals with, their priorities, their vision. You know, these are not things you get just by making a cold call and asking, can I speak to someone and can I put your organisation on my application? This takes time, and for us as researchers, I think that means that we have to be prepared to begin our partnerships with organisations in a range of ways, really, and we can talk about that a bit later. But I also think that it relies on the organisation knowing the researcher's field of expertise too. And so I guess there's a message in that for us as researchers. It's really about building our profile really clearly and effectively so that organisations know what our area of research interests are. And they do that through a whole range of things. You know, my experience is they look at publications, they hear you at a keynote address, they see you at conference presentations, and word of mouth across organisations. You know, there's a grapevine that's pretty active out there that lets one organisation know whether a research is easy to work with, whether they're collaborative, whether they meet deadlines. And so from the organisation's perspective, they want to also be working with someone that will benefit their organisation. I think when we talk about it being mutually advantageous, I think for researchers, that's pretty obvious for us. We get to work directly with a desired cohort that we want to research or work with. And we also get a feeling that our knowledge and skills will make a valuable contribution to the work of the organisation. That's a real benefit for us. Mm-hmm. And I think when you find the right partner, there's a genuine interest in and need for the research that you're going to undertake. So that immediately ensures that your research is going to have some impact, and impact is really important, not only in terms of our key performance indicators, but in terms of the value of the work that we do. And I think that's an important consideration.
Mm. So, Kath, I can just jump in there and just sort of summarise a few things that you talked about. So, like, one was about, you know, sharing a mutual value position. One was about that whatever the partnership is, it should be mutually advantageous to both the research team and also to the organisation. There was about getting to know the organisation and thoroughly, and that goes beyond looking at their website, for example, but really getting to know them and the issues that they're grappling with. You also mentioned that, you know, it's a long game in a way, so we can talk some more about that one later too. And getting out and sharing your research so that you get noticed and that the organisation potentially notices you, or through their networks they notice you. So, like, how do you find a place that shares a value position? What do you do to start to investigate, and, you know, do you stumble upon them, or do you actively go searching for them? How does that work?
Well, I think that sometimes that can happen in a variety of ways. I think I often start partnerships through consultancy work. Organisations are looking for someone who can come in and, you know, in my case, it might be working with teachers in STEM education or primary science education. And so I have developed professional learning workshops and I get to know the teachers. I never taught in the Catholic system. I always taught in the state system. So I've had to learn the intricate workings of the Catholic system. I have to learn what they see as priorities. I get to know the teachers. I get to know key personnel within the organisation. I get a sense of the role they expect to see teachers play. And one of the big messages that I picked up really early from Catholic education that I really liked was that they wanted teachers to be more proactive about using their professional knowledge and making decisions and being leaders within schools that weren't always just a labelled leader. And so I thought that was really interesting. They were concerned that they were getting feedback from teachers that professional learning didn't interest them, it wasn't meeting their needs, and so there was this, great invitation to get into that space. Sometimes I've found partnerships occur because you're sort of scaffolded into partnerships, sometimes with colleagues. And a little story about this is a nice story, because I worked with John Loughran at the Knox School, a P-12 school, and they wanted to be recognised within the research, and we worked with them for a couple of years, and I invited Jen Mansfield into that partnership. And then when John retired, I thought, oh my God, like, he was the leader of the project. What do I do now? Do I let this slip through my fingers? So I, wrote to the principal and said, well, we've had a great partnership, still here if there's any further work that, you might like to pursue. And he said, come in, Kath, let's have a chat about this. And a whole new project opened up, and I was able to secure a project. I think it was worth about $113,000 over 2 years. And then I had a fantastic opportunity to broaden the team, and Megan Adams came on board in the team, and we've done some fantastic work together. So it was really great, because I was, that opportunity arose because a colleague sort of brought me into that. And then I was able to use that as an opportunity to create opportunities for other colleagues too. So sometimes you also are asked to do particular presentations or work, and I think I can be honest, in the science area, one of the organisations that we're really trying hard, I am, to build a partnership with at the moment is the Department of Education and Training. That's been a tricky sort of relationship. People move in and out of roles within the Department of Education, and so it's hard to maintain a consistent ongoing relationship when people are shifting. But the department does have an emphasis on STEM education, and when I was asked, it was sort of actually an interesting story, because the person who contacted me about some work in STEM had been given by my name by someone who'd moved into the department from Catholic education. So there's this cross movement of people across organisations that can also spread your name. And I went to Mandy and said, we've got this chance to do some STEM work, and we did. And so we sort of, we do utilise those opportunities to open up broader conversations around further opportunities in the future that we could explore. And interestingly, I think when an organisation gets to know you, one of the things that happened as a result of that is, we're contacted when tenders are coming out, because they like to work with us as researchers, and they say, there's a tender coming out, keep your eye on this. And of course, our engagement team is all over that as well. So these things can happen in a variety of ways. For me too, amazing things happen at an individual school level, where you can just start with some teachers and it can grow into some fantastic research projects. So I think there's various ways, Mandy, that those partnerships can grow.
And at the heart of the things that you're talking about, it seems to be the relationship building really matters, and, having a genuine interest in the organisation, wanting to know more about it and building up that kind of relationship over time. What I really like too in what you're talking about is not just about you building the relationship with the partners. It's about you developing a team as well. And they're different, it's not always the same team necessarily. It can be different teams depending on the nature of the work. So, seeing and creating opportunities for others, I think, is a really nice part of what you're talking about as well. That also helps them to be able to leverage their relationships with those organisations too. So, so that idea of consultancy work, small scale work with teachers, contract work with organisations as well, being scaffolded in. That was a really nice story, talking about how you took the next step after somebody was John was moving on. That all helped to kind of build those partnerships, but at the same time always paying attention from what you're talking about to what's going on in the industry, what's going on with the partner, what is it that they are concerned about. And getting back to that question I had before, where are the aligned values that really make that connection a strong one? I think that's great.
We had a really nice example of that, and it's great to have Megan here, because in the Knox School we had this project that we had developed with the school that was going to run for 2 years, and we all know that research is just this journey that's filled with potholes. We just have challenges along the way, and in the middle of it all we had COVID and everything shut down, and so we weren't able to go to the school, we weren't able to work with the teachers, and I kept doing my critical friend role with the principal. But he said to me one day, there's this great work going on with teachers in the online space, and we want to learn what impact this is having. And so suddenly the whole focus of the research shifted, and because our team was just so fantastic with Jen and Megan, we just thought, this is really exciting, and we all sort of I hate that word, but we all pivoted on, and we changed, and we had these online focus groups, and what came out of it was incredible. We are so proud of that research, and I think too, you want to talk about benefits for the partner organisation. We found all of this fantastic data, and we were able to sort of change the whole conversation around COVID shutdown. When a school actually saw it as a potentially positive experience, it was amazing what came out of it. But we chose to get that work out there to highlight the work of the school as well. So we targeted things like Monash Lens. We did a series of 3 articles in Teacher magazine. I remember Megan saying to me when she went down to Tasmania, her brother, who's a principal, saw those articles in Teacher magazine. So, the impact. I think that's, you want to know how to impact the partners that you want to work with as well, and what will be the publications and outlets that will reach them. And we're also, of course, working on articles for peer-reviewed journal magazines, and we've got one in at the moment. But I think that you've got to have a great team that's agile, can respond to opportunities. The partners' needs changed. And had we kept going down and said, no, we agreed on this particular research project, it would have been a nightmare. So, you're quite right. You've got to be watching the organisation, being aware of their needs, using your skills to respond to those opportunities as best you can. And that's pretty exciting stuff, actually.
Exciting and quite challenging at times too. So let's kind of move on to the next level, because when you're thinking about a linkage, that is a whole new set of challenges or opportunities, probably you'd frame it as. And so let's talk, for instance, about the ARC Linkage project that you won as lead CI last year with Catholic Education, now called Max. So what would you say would be, like, if you could make a checklist or a wish list of things that you need to consider if you're going to be developing a project team to be working with a partner for a linkage, so all of a sudden we've stepped up into that next level. What are some of the key ideas or the key considerations that you need to take on board? Yeah, and it may be some of the things that you've already talked about too.
Oh, I think that there were a lot of things that went through my mind. You have to ensure, as we've already said, and that, as Sharon said right at the outset, that the issue that's going to be researched is something that the partners actually see as really important. So I had used that, the earlier grant, which was called the Dean's Partnership Award. See, there's a really interesting challenge I faced here with Catholic Education. I had worked with Catholic Education for a number of years as a consultant. I hadn't worked with them as a researcher. I had to shift my identity with them and position myself as a researcher. And that took quite a bit of time, because the people they thought of when they were thinking about research was John Loughran, Mandy Berry, all these amazing people in our faculty. not really Kathy Smith. She was someone that, you know, was great in running professional learning programs, but wasn't the researcher. So it was really important that I had to reposition myself within that organisation. The Dean's Partnership Award allowed me to do that because I went to them and said, we've got this money and I want to do some research with you about something that you're really interested in. And it turned out to be critical and creative thinking in STEM education. And what came out of that was some really interesting findings, particularly the use of problem-based learning and the language around that, and a lack of clarity in teacher thinking around problem-based learning. So while it was positioned in STEM, I had to choose a team who was going to bring real expertise to that project. So I needed people whose research was going to add value to that investigation. And that's really hard because we've got a really dynamic science team in our faculty. We've got a fantastic collection of researchers. And, you know, ideally you'd like to say to everybody, come on board. You know, we want you to be part of this project, but you have to be really critical in determining what is this research essentially about and whose research is going to add value to this project. Jen Mansfield's research about teachers seeking equilibrium in their own understanding and practice became critical, I thought, in this work because teachers were going to be challenged by some of these ideas. Mandy's work around teacher thinking, pedagogical knowledge was also really important. Deb Corrigan's work around values and beliefs and how that shapes what teachers do and think. All of these areas seem to me to be really important, but I also, I suppose, had other agendas underlying this as well. I was suddenly going to be, if it was successful, a leader of a big ARC grant. God, where do I start? I don't know. I need some mentors in this mix as well. I need people who've got a track record, who can advise me about all of the administrative stuff that needs to be done. And I have to say that all credit to Sharon and the team because they're always there to help me with anything. But Mandy and Deb were fantastic because they were my mentors. They are my mentors in this process. I also thought it was really important to have early career researchers as part of the team to create opportunities. And so that was particularly important for me. I think the composition, a linkage grant is also strengthened if you can broaden the potential benefit of the project. So Sharon advised me at one stage, right, we need to start thinking beyond Victoria. We've got to start thinking at a national level. And I always think that because we got the issue that the research was built around, because we got that right, we were able to leverage off the networks of Catholic education in Melbourne, because as soon as they shared this potential research project with other sectors across Australia, Brisbane jumped in immediately and said, yes, this is an issue that we're really interested in as well. It wasn't difficult to find another partner, but we didn't have to do that work. We actually leveraged off the partner organisations' networks, and so that was really important. Another thing was to broaden the expertise within the team, and so that took us to looking at other universities. And I should say, before I move on to other universities, we even went across faculties within our own university. So because it was a STEM project, it was a fantastic opportunity to go to some other faculties in the university and look at the expertise that was there. And Mandy introduced us to Nicoletta Maynard, who's in the engineering faculty, who has a wide range of experience working with teachers in schools and has a really strong track record in this space. And Nicoletta was really excited to get on board. So I thought that was exciting to get beyond the education faculty. But also we thought, well, if we're working with Brisbane, can we also connect to some expertise with a university in Queensland? And that led us to the University of Queensland and Dr. Peter Allerton with his work in critical and creative thinking. Peter was very excited. He was also an early career researcher and saw this as a fantastic opportunity. And actually, we met Peter through a totally different situation where we were all involved in a writing project, working on a book about critical and creative thinking. And we met Peter at that writing workshop. And so don't underestimate the links that you can make with colleagues in a variety of ways. So expertise matters. The quality of the research that they bring. Also, it needs to be stated that when you're writing your linkage grant, you want the team to be seen as really quite a powerful team. So having professors like Mandy and Deb in the team were really great. It lifted the experience and the expertise that was part of the project. But I think the diversity of the team and the range of expertise was a really big consideration. And we needed people who could work well together too. That was also important.
I think that's important, the relationship of the team members, and also, well, with industry. Now, I'm just going to take a pause for a minute and see if there's anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment before we move on to the challenges part. Just hum a little tune while we're doing our wait time.
Maybe I'll just give it a go. I have a question.
Thanks, Katrina.
Thanks for sharing your experiences. That's really exciting. And I'm wondering if you had any experiences in terms of publishing or writing or presenting conference papers together with your industry partners. If teachers, schools, principals, or any people in the department are interested in this kind of work, that would be great to hear.
Thanks, Katrina. Well, I think the work with Knox is a really nice example of that. I knew that the school wanted to involve teachers in professional writing. And so the first phase of the project was about working with leadership, and they were developing written cases of their work, which was really interesting. But from that particular experience, we thought that moving teachers straight on to writing for professional journals was going to be really challenging. And so we chose our publications really carefully. The Monash Lens article was a co-authored piece with both the deputy principal and also the member of staff in the school, who I think was leader of special projects. Megan will correct me if that title's not right, but so we wrote with them in that article. The 3 teacher magazine articles were written in collaboration with teachers, so we drew on the data from the focus groups that we had conducted, but we also worked with project leaders in the school and did collaborative writing with them. So their names were on all of those articles that were published, and we see that as a really important output of our research work. And in the future, if our ARC project is successful, we will certainly have exemplars of practice on our website that is showcasing the work of teachers within schools. And who knows, we may even do some co-writing there. We'll see how all that comes together. But yes, that's a question that I love, Katrina, because I really value making sure the teacher's voice is out there in this educational discourse and sharing their expertise and their professional insights. And it's a really rewarding experience for teachers to write. And it's really a great way for us to develop our skills too in helping teachers write in a way that meets all of the parameters that you have around articles that you have to put together. So Catholic Ed has always been keen on their teachers writing. The Knox School was really keen and supportive about their teachers writing. Interestingly, I did hit a bit of a snag with a project in South Australia with the Department of Education in South Australia. They were much more protective of teachers writing being published. They weren't quite so keen on that. There seemed to be, they wanted more control over that. So organisations differ in their willingness for teachers to do those things. And, you know, you just try and navigate your way through those challenges. So I hope that provides some insight there.
Yes, thank you. It's really great to hear, because I've heard that things like this become your evidence when you go for linkage grants. That becomes your evidence of collaborative work and really important and deep work, not just research project, but some outcomes and which are published for wider audiences. So did it help you, this grant?
Yes, I think so. Certainly on my list of publications, there were a couple of books that I had written with staff in schools that we had published. And I have to say, talk about being mutually beneficial. teachers who wrote chapters in those books used those on their CVs, and a lot of them ended up in leadership positions in schools. So when you talk about it being mutually advantageous, we're not only furthering our own careers, but it's quite rewarding to know that that work is also building the profile of teachers as professionals as well.
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thanks.
That's nice. Any other questions that we have at this point? Okay, well, let's go on to the next bit, because universities typically work rather slowly and with many layers of administration around these kinds of, particularly these kinds of applications, whereas industry often we think about as moving a lot faster. They want to get things done tomorrow. They have expectations about the project. So can you talk, and I'm probably bringing together two of the questions we're going to talk about. One is about managing expectations and the other one is related to challenges. So perhaps with specific reference to Catholic Ed and this linkage project, we've had, last year a pandemic, we've had the Catholic Ed wanting to go ahead. What were some of the challenges in relation to working with the partner and managing the expectations?
Well, I think there are some practical considerations in that when I was undertaking that research work with Catholic Ed around critical and creative thinking, it became clear that the science team were putting together their business strategy for the coming 3 years, and they wanted to be involved in a large research project. So I wouldn't have known that unless I was working with them in a smaller capacity. But as any organisation has its requirements or its structures, that money had to be allocated, it had to be moved out of their budgets at particular times. And I remember saying to Sharon, Catholic Ed want to put aside $90,000 over 3 years. They want the first $30,000 out of the account. We haven't even finished writing the application yet. Like it's all, it was this mismatch of how do we work with this. So that's a challenge, because I think the partner organisation perhaps wasn't clear about the level of detail and time that was involved in developing the ARC linkage application. I think we were particularly, we seemed to be slow in the way that we did it, but it paid off. So that was of benefit. But we were very considered, I think, in how we wrote that application, because while the issue was around problem-based learning, there is quite a bit of literature around problem-based learning. So why go and explore it even further? We had to make a really strong case for that. And we also, as Sharon said, we had to think about the benefits of this work from a social and cultural and economic perspective. And so we had to anchor it somewhere really solidly with the, I suppose, national priorities for education. And that took some thinking about. So while we were doing that, Maddie and I are sort of smiling, because I was trying to keep the partner organisation happy. So anything they asked me to do, I would do, because I was trying to keep them happy, whether it was doing a presentation somewhere or running a professional learning or meetings or whatever. Yes, I'll do it. And it got to the end of that year and I said to Maddie, I'm exhausted. I don't think I can do it anymore. But it was good, because they stayed invested in the whole process and they were part of the process, and we constantly were checking back with them all the time. So managing those expectations becomes really important. And then, of course, I had to manage expectations around finances and things when we were going to invite the second partner in, a smaller contribution from the second partner. And I've sort of found myself having to manage that partner's expectations around their level of involvement in the research project for less of a financial commitment. Like it's you tread these paths carefully. There's political considerations that you're always attending to very diplomatically. But I do think that's a challenge, and the amount of time that's involved in those sorts of conversations and ensuring clarity. Another challenge, I think, is the notion of that research creep, where the partner organisation has signed you up, they've entered into a research project, but they sometimes expect that you're going to be doing all of these other things for them as well. And you're constantly saying, well, hang on, here's the parameters around the research project, and remember, this is what we're focusing on, and anything outside of that is sort of above and beyond the research. It's really interesting, but it's not the research. So you manage expectations, I think, through open communication, conversations where you have to sort of be upfront with information. But at the same time, you do it very diplomatically and professionally, and you always make the partner feel extremely valued in the whole experience. So, yeah.
Did you schedule regular meetings? Like, because you talk about having open and regular communication. So did you sort of sit down and say, right, we're going to meet, you know, once every 2 weeks or something, or was it a bit more organic than that?
Well, in putting the application together, I think meetings were on a needs basis, and the type of meetings I had with the organisation differed. You know, I had meetings, for example, at Catholic Ed in Melbourne with the people I was directly working with, but then I also had to have meetings with their managers, their leaders, to make sure that there was a clear message being sort of shared up the line, so to speak, so that when we came to get approval, as you do in the linkage application, it's not just the person you're dealing with who has to approve the application, but the leaders within the organisation itself. That was very clear. People were very well informed about what was going on. So I kept touching base with the partner organisations, asking, do you need any further support? Is there anything that's not clear? When they were making decisions about budgeting, we would have a meeting trying to work out what was in-kind support, what was the cash support. When we were looking at the development of certain committees that would become a part of the application. So we had our project team committee, but we had the advisory board, we had steering committees within organisations, and part of that was helping the organisation work out who would be involved on those committees and what their roles would be, because that's all part of the application. So there was quite a lot of meetings, but honestly, at that stage, it was pretty much on a needs basis. Of course, now it's very regular. The meetings, we have monthly meetings, and all partners are involved equally, and we have further committees that are there to also support the work that we do.
Yeah, that's great, and that was written in to the project really well too. And so you mentioned it, and it's potentially quite awkward. Like, how do you talk about money and how much people? I mean, you said that Catholic Ed had allocated a certain amount of money, but how do you broach that subject of whether you wanted more, or you know, these things can be quite awkward.
They're always, well, I don't know. Some people handle it really well. I always find them awkward, right? I just think when you have to talk about money, you I don't know, you feel really vulnerable. It's just difficult. But I think that comes also back to one of the things that makes a successful partnership is when you go into a linkage project, you usually have an established relationship with that organisation. These are not the first times you've talked about money or being you know, being billeted for your time and all of that sort of thing. And one thing about the ARC linkage application is it's very structured in how you have to record costings and so forth. I found it more difficult having those conversations with Brisbane Catholic Education because I hadn't worked with them before. As I said earlier, you know, that partnership was leveraged off the network of Melbourne Catholic Education. So one of the great things that happened was we were asked to do a briefing for schools even before we submitted the application, that this, you know, this was work that was coming up, whether it was an ARC project or not. We were going to do some work in problem-based learning, and they invited their partners down from Brisbane to attend that. So having that face-to-face meeting where we could stand and talk together was so much easier than over the phone or even Zoom, really, and talking about, you know, realistically, what do you think you might be able to contribute to this particular project? And what's your budgets, and how would, you know, we'd like to see people from the organisation supporting teachers in their schools. How might you be able to do that? How would that be considered in-kind support? So it was difficult, but we sort of had the structures outlined for the project, and so it was easy to speak to those structures and also allow one organisation to see how another organisation was allocating funding and so forth in relation to those. It's always a bit uncomfortable, but you know, you just, like we all do, we sort of suck it up and have the conversation. I don't know there's any, I don't think that's easy to do, but
no, but I mean, the point that you made, having already established the relationship, is a good one. So it's a nice contrast with when you didn't know the organisation, and how you manage that as well, and having that ARC structure then also, because there are certain expectations in order to enter into the ARC linkage, then you can use those as points of conversation too. So that's great. Let me open up again. We've got about 10 minutes before we're going to finish. So before I ask you a question about any one thing that you wished you'd done differently, if you had a magic wand and you could wave and go backwards, but I'll just open up again to the group and say, any other questions or maybe experiences that you have, or that you're working with a partner now, and it would be nice just to kind of sound out some ideas or questions or issues that you're grappling with at the moment, or even in approaching a partner. Well, created a lot of space for some questions if people want to ask them.
Kathy, could you backpedal about the department and how one approaches the department if you're cold calling and have no relationship with them?
Yeah, I think cold calling is always really difficult. In my, you know, I came into academia quite late in life, and prior to that I ran my own business, and also I worked in a science centre as a manager of education programs. Sometimes I had to reach out in cold calls to organisations. I think that's always hard to do, Claire, particularly in an organisation where people are moving around in their roles, and the department has, I'm sure I'm not saying anything that people don't know here, over the last 10 years there's been a lot of restructuring in the department, and people who were in roles moved and went into other areas, and so that's your connection, and that connection is lost and you feel like you're starting again all the time. Whereas in Catholic Ed, they had the same people in the roles, and they had a vision for what they wanted to do. So that just made it so much easier. I think the answer to that is, if you find someone in the organisation and you have the opportunity, as Mandy and I did, to go and run a professional learning workshop, you keep building on that partnership. You keep in touch with them all the time. I mean, I've written to them telling them about the little food festival that's coming up. I talk to them about initiatives that are happening here at Monash in STEM, any of the seminars that we have going. I just keep constantly in contact with people, and I think that seems to work. You're not pushy, you're not in their face, but it sort of creates this presence that you become a bit of the go-to person or the go-to organisation if they need help or assistance with something. And that's certainly how my work in Ireland has started too. I mean, that's a very funny story, actually, that I was doing this presentation and there wasn't a large group there. That often happens when we go overseas to conferences. And this woman came up to me at the end of it and she said, I'm a teacher in school. I just loved this. And she said, I'm actually here to help you with the technical working of the computer. Anyway, we just sort of clicked and we kept in contact. Now, that teacher then got a job with the education department in Ireland. And I was going to a conference. We used to Zoom and talk about some of the challenges she was experiencing. And I was going to a conference in Wales, and I said to her, why don't I come across and we meet? And she said, well, if you come across, I'll introduce you to the head of the junior cycle of teaching and also the national curriculum head. Like, out of nowhere, these links emerged. And so I met with them. That was great. We had a really nice day. We sort of talked about a whole lot of things. And at the end, the manager said, we have a conference in May. I'm wondering if you'd like to come back and speak to the staff. And I said, oh, I'd really love that, you know. Now, then I didn't hear anything. So I just sent a little email at Christmas saying, have a lovely Christmas. It was really nice to work with you. I just sort of keep your name in there somewhere. And, you know, Padraig wrote back to me and said, yes, we want you to come, you know, and then that all happened. And then he said, oh, we'd love to do some great work. So it was really taking off. And then COVID happened, complete shutdown. So I would write to him and say, how's it all going in Ireland? What are you facing over there? He'd write back to me with an update. And then, you know, same at Christmas, hope the year's gone well. And then he's written back to me recently and said, Kath, we're moving a lot of our professional learning into the online space. Could you be part of it? So suddenly an opportunity's come up, Claire. I think if you meet someone, you just gently work at it. And you're not in their face, you're not pushing, you're not asking a lot of them. I don't. I just sort of keep a presence there with them. And that sort of works well. That's how it's paid off for me anyway.
Presence is a nice word. Thank you.
Yeah, and in a very genuine way too, from the sounds of it, that is, yeah, about a real connection. Yeah. Thanks. Great question, Claire. Other questions or comments?
I have one. Well, it's a double barrel. One is just, how do you know when to let go of a relationship? If you've been doing a lot of the work that you've said, the background work, the free research work, to at least try and work towards a publication and demonstrating track record, that's sort of one. But then the other is, particularly for new people to Monash, Victoria, Australia, are there structural things that we could do that really helps make those connections in terms of, you know, all those sub connections that clearly, you know, you've talked about a great social network, social capital in terms of John and Mandy, etc. But for somebody coming in who doesn't know that, the faculty doesn't even know sort of the extent of the work that they do, are there things structurally that we need to do to enhance that, particularly if they're not senior academics that sort of get spotlighted, like the expectation around professors perhaps?
Well, a couple of things come to my mind there. I think it's funny, that letting go question. I think that's a great question, actually. I've been working with a primary school now for a very long time, and at the end of every year I say, well, you know, we've probably come to the end now, and they go, no, Kath, we want you back next year. And I think, oh my God. Anyway, but we've done some amazing things, and we have written a book together, and we have had publications. But I think the nature of that relationship actually speaks to the complexity of schools, because we keep coming up with really interesting things to research, and staff keep changing. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because I haven't let that one go yet. But I think that could sometimes organisations let go of you. I mean, that's the reality. But I just try to keep in contact with organisations all the time. It doesn't mean I'm always working intensively with them, but I just keep in contact with them. And sometimes, you know, I might share some work with them. In fact, I shared with Ireland all of the articles that Megan and Jen and I had developed and sent that over, and they were fascinated with that. So the letting go is a really interesting question, and other people might have some ideas about that. I think how you help people, the structures is a really interesting question. I don't think you can be passive. You have to profile yourself. You know, all of those things that we often get emails about, and I'm guilty of it too, you know, keeping your Pure page up to date, making sure that you actually make it clear what your area of research is. I think that's really important. It's very easy to spread yourself across a whole range of areas, but not necessarily demonstrate expertise in any particular area. So working out what your story is, what your narrative is about your research, I think becomes really important, and utilising those structures to tell that story. There's also, of course, you know, all the social media stuff that people say, to be tweeting and all the rest. I'm not terribly good at all of that. Other people are better at that than I am. But, and I do think it puts a responsibility on all of us to notice people coming into the faculty and taking the time to talk to them about their research. And I have to be honest, when I came into the faculty, that was one of the hardest things. I felt a bit invisible, to be honest, because I hadn't come from nothing. And yet I remember, I mean, I was lucky in that I had a few people who knew my work, but I'd done a lot of things. I wanted to bring those connections to the faculty, but I wasn't always asked about that. And so I think it's important that we talk to each other, we find out what each other's interests are and expertise. It's great to work with colleagues. I mean, it was great for me to say to Megan, come on, let's do this. And we've just loved it. So I think creating opportunities where we can bring our colleagues in is really important, and the design of those ARC projects where we build in opportunities for early career researchers or new people in the faculty, I think becomes really important beyond the structures. It's a mindset, it's an awareness of us to see that our colleagues are a huge pool of resources for our work. And not always people who do the same work as us. It's exciting to work with people who take you into different areas. So anyway, they're just my thoughts. So I'm not sure if that's useful.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. And I'm just mindful of time. And, you know, today is a nice opportunity that Kat's reminding of us, you know, even though we're working in the virtual environment, we are moving between the physical and the virtual environment. So, you know, feel free to catch up with us. We're not going to have time now to ask Kathy about the one thing that she might have changed if she could go back and do it again. So that is the perfect entry question when you encounter her in the staff room or somewhere around the building or online. Ask to have a question with her. I take your point, Lisa, and I think there's real opportunities that we might try to build in to the new school structure, the new research themes, to really help people to get to know each other. And one thing, the interfaculty grants have shown us that that's been really productive too. So I'm going to maybe have other questions. That would be great. We can have a chance to be able to share those with each other following this. But I'm just going to give the floor back over to Sharon now to talk about the Partnership Development Grant, which hopefully gives us a chance to build on some of these ideas. But thanks, Kath. Brilliant. You see all these lovely messages here coming up for your thoughtful and generous sharing of your wisdom here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy, and for everyone else who's taken the time to participate today and ask some really valuable questions. So you've obviously heard some great tips for things to be thinking about when building those partnerships with industry. But the important thing that you need to be thinking about when applying for a linkage or any other sort of external grants is that you need to have track record with those partners. So with that in mind, last year we introduced the Partnership Development Grant, internal grant in the faculty to help facilitate those partnerships and accelerate that partnership development so that you can look at applying for a linkage in the future. So just briefly, we're offering 2 rounds for the Partnership Development Grant this year. If you haven't thought about it already, it's a bit late for the April round because that is actually due tomorrow. But we will be offering a second round on the 6th of August. And all the details are up on the intranet in terms of the guidelines and what's required. But it's $10,000 there to sort of seed fund any projects that you might be thinking about there. So thank you for today. And as I said earlier, I am going to be sending out an online EOI form, just looking for people who are thinking about applying for a linkage either this year or next year. It's just something to get you thinking, get you on our radar so that we can start working with you closely in developing that application. So thank you, everyone. That's it from me. So thank you.
Good on your team.
And that's it from us.
Thank you so much. It's really great.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Super.